what I look for when I'm working on the farm or on the house or anything else, look at the toolbox that I've got. And a lot of times I do need special tools. And I realize that as the Attorney General, as he faces certain issues that's coming before the state, he needs specialized tools. But what we need to know is what those tools are going to cost. That's what our taxpayers deserve, is the transparency, the right to transparency that they have as these cases are handled. Senate Bill 432 creates mechanisms to further good practice in government officials' use of those contingency fee counsel and guard against creating opportunities for abuses. And with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions. I do have some very reputable witnesses lined up to testify on this.
I was Attorney General of Florida until January 4th of this year, and the reason I'm here today is at the invitation of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, which supports this legislation. And it's legislation that's largely modeled after a proposal that I developed in my office when I first became Attorney General several years ago. It's one we had as a policy, and then the Florida legislature adopted it, very closely resembling this legislation. I have spoken with General Koster about it, and I know that he has a couple of reservations, but by and large I think he will wind up supporting much of what's here. To answer your question, or one of the Senator's questions, yours I believe, Senator, I don't think have been any, at least from my recollection of what General Koster's told me, any contingency fee cases in recent years by this Attorney General's office, nor had there been any in Florida in recent years. But the reason we got concerned about this was because of the big tobacco settlement. In the tobacco settlement in Florida, the attorneys got $3.4 billion in attorney's fees. And the people of Florida, including the then governor, felt that this was a big, huge ripoff because the percentage contract went up to the billions of dollars that were there since the settlement occurred and there was no actual trial and so forth. What we're concerned now with as then recently Attorney General and those who are currently in office is there's an increasingly larger role for state attorneys generals in enforcing consumer protection laws and in many other areas. And most attorney generals are going to have a hard time in future years being able to handle all the matters that are involved in an attorney general's office through the staffing in their own offices. And as a consequence of that, knowing that federal law, for example, the Dodd-Frank law recently passed, delegates a lot of this responsibility to enforce federal laws to the states, then there needs to be some parameter for the protection and transparency of the office for public purposes. There seems to me, and why I wrote this, to need to be some very specific outlines of when an attorney general actually goes and makes that request. And so the legislation that Senator Munzlinger has produced and what we did in Florida was to say there has to be a written finding by the Attorney General that there's a need for outside counsel, a need for contingency fee and specific method of payment, and why in detail. Then there needs to be a bidding process, not under the state law, but in his office, to allow a number of law firms to compete to do the business, and he has a lot of discretion, Attorney General does, in deciding that fact, or whomever is under your law designated to do that. And then once you've decided that you're going the contingency fee route and you have some to be made, there have to be time records kept by the attorneys, even though it's billed on a contingency fee basis. The contract itself has to be published on the website of the Attorney General once the contingency fee contract is signed, along with this written memorandum that says, hey, I've determined that we need to have an outside counsel and under this kind of fee set. It has to be done within 5 days of the time the contract is signed. It has to stay up there during the duration of it. And then there are provisions that say that once contingency fees are paid, they have to be posted within 15 days and stay up for a year on the Attorney General's website so the public can see. All of that is the transparency in private attorney contracting that is referred to in the title of Senator Munzlinger's bill. And then the last feature, which is I think very important, is there is a cap on attorney's fees under contingency fees. It's 25% of the first $10 million, 20% of the next 5 is cumulative, added up. then 15% of the next 5, 10% of the next 5, and 5% of the balance, up to a total hard cap of $50 million for any single matter that's handled, regardless of the number of lawyers or law firms involved for that particular duration. And we felt, after going over, we created this in our own office. There were a lot of people suggesting ideas around the country because everybody knows these things happen, and there have been abuses in attorney general's offices, not here, to my knowledge, not in Florida, to my knowledge, but I do know there are a number of attorney generals who've been seriously questioned about their relationship with outside counsel and with the fee structure and with its lack of transparency to the public.
Mr. Abishan.
Rich Abishan, General Counsel of the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, testifying in support of the bill. This is a general proposition that government needs more transparency, and that if this is indeed public money that we're seeking, that we have those protections in place to ensure that public money is spent in the best possible way. This is by no means an indictment of Attorney General Koster for any particular case that he may have entered into, or any particular litigation that he may have entered into, along with any fee arrangements with any attorneys. Let me say that as an outset. This is not an indictment of Attorney General Koster. This is a general proposition of good government, and that's why the Missouri Chamber of Commerce is pushing this legislation in this session.